If the mind can observe its own thoughts, who exactly is doing the watching? Welcome to today's episode. This one starts with a simple curiosity about the human mind. Are we one single self? Or layered somehow inside? Some traditions describe humans as having two parts. In Islamic thought, for example, people sometimes speak about the self and the impulses, often called nafs, and a higher awareness. Modern science doesn't use the same words. But interestingly, it arrives at a somewhat similar question. Is the human mind made of layers? And if so, how many? 2? 3? Or is that just a convenient story we tell to simplify something much more complicated? Let's start with the simplest idea. Many scientists talk about the brain as if it contains two broad systems. The first is the impulse system. This part reacts quickly. It handles fear, anger, hunger, desire, and the basic drives that help us survive. It doesn't think much about the future. Its message is simple. Do it now. Then there's the reasoning system. This one plans. It slows things down. It considers consequences. It might say something like, "Wait, think first." You can probably recognize this tension in daily life. You feel the urge to say something in anger. Then another part of your mind says, maybe not. Two forces, impulse and control. So far, that sounds like a two-layer model. But here's where things get interesting. There seems to be something else happening as well. Sometimes you don't just feel an emotion. You notice it. You might suddenly think, I'm getting angry right now. In that moment, something inside the mind is not just reacting. It's observing. And that raises a fascinating possibility. Maybe there's a third layer, not just impulses and reasoning, but something that watches the mind itself. In modern psychology and neuroscience, this ability is sometimes described as meta-awareness. Very simply, it means the mind becoming aware of its own state. It's the difference between being angry and realizing you are angry, between thinking a thought and noticing that the thought just appeared. Some researchers connect this to networks in the brain related to self-monitoring and internal awareness. But here's an important point. Science does not usually describe this observer as a separate entity or soul inside the head. Instead, it's seen as another process produced by the brain. Different systems interacting. Different networks checking each other. In other words, the observer might not be a separate person inside you. It might just be the brain monitoring itself. Still, the experience feels very real. When people practice deep reflection or meditation, many report a similar sensation. Thoughts seem to come and go, while something quieter simply watches, almost like sitting behind the mind rather than inside it. Is that a real layer of consciousness? Or just a clever trick produced by the brain? That's where the debate becomes truly fascinating. Some scientists believe the sense of self is a real mental process. Not a physical object, but a dynamic function the brain generates. Others take a more radical view. They suggest that the self might actually be a kind of story the brain tells about its own activity. A useful narrative. A way to organize experiences and decisions. In that interpretation, the observer inside you might not be a stable inner entity at all. It might simply be the brain describing itself. A running commentary. So when we talk about 3 layers: impulse, reason, and observer, we might be using a helpful model, a simplified map, not necessarily the territory itself. Science often works this way. Complex systems are reduced to models, so we can talk about them, study them, and test ideas. But the real brain is not neatly divided. It's a vast network. Signals moving constantly. Processes overlapping. And yet, the model still captures something powerful about human experience. We feel impulses. We apply reason. And sometimes we step back and watch both. Imagine a moment when you suddenly notice your own thoughts. A thought appears, then another, and for a brief instant you realize, I'm watching my mind think. At that moment, a strange question emerges. If you can observe a thought, then that thought isn't you. But then what exactly is the thing doing the observing? That question sits right at the center of the mystery of consciousness. Is there truly a watcher behind the mind? Or is the brain simply good at creating the illusion of one? Science hasn't fully answered that yet. But the curiosity itself might be the most interesting part, because the moment we ask that question, the mind is already watching itself,